Hey friends, welcome back to Mustard Seed Homesteading. If you're new, welcome. My name is Megan and today we're going to harvest all of my basil. They have blossomed and grown so much in my garden and I need to harvest them, so let's get started. So I will be talking throughout the video just so that I can point some things out to you all, but this is my first bed that I'm going to be harvesting. This is the red rubia basil. Now the next clip my audio cut off just a bit, but I'm explaining how the basil will continue to grow off the main stem after you harvest it. See that this is the main stem right here. Now if you look at every one of these branches, it has little leaves that are coming out of the armpits, and that right there is going to be a whole new set of basil leaves that are going to grow from there. Let me see if I can get a close-up. Now you can see that the main stem is where I cut off the top for harvesting, but from that main stem you can see these little branches with little tiny leaves on them. That is where a whole new set of basil leaves are going to grow so that you can continue to harvest, and it's just going to continue to get bushier and bushier. Here's another angle of the basil plant that I harvested, and again you can see where the main stem was cut and then all these branches sticking out. Now these smaller leaves that I'm pointing at will become its own branch of basil leaves that will grow and give me more basil. And quick tip, if you can see that little bit of flowering right there at the top of the basil, that's what you don't want, because once it flowers, it will go to seed and will stop producing basil. Now, when it comes to pruning your basil, you don't want to prune all the way to the bottom. You want to leave a little bit of the main stem and some branches like I showed previously so that it can continue to grow and give you many more harvests until the season ends. And isn't that so beautiful? That is the red rubia basil. It's my first time ever growing it, and I'm going to definitely continue to grow them because it's such a beautiful basil and gives so much color to the garden. Now, because I have a tremendous amount of basil that I have to harvest before it gets dark, I'm being very careful with how I'm pruning, but I am trying to focus on cutting off the main top and leaving a lot of the bottom stem so that it can continue to branch out. Now, all the plants that are in the middle of that bed, if you saw my garden tour video, are all peppers. And I have the red rubia basil completely surrounding the perimeter of this bed as a companion plant for the peppers. And so far, they've been doing wonderful. And I plan to plant them again with the peppers next year. So here's what the basil plant looks like after harvesting. You'll see that on all the basil that I harvested, I left a lot of the little branches so that a whole new set of basil stems and leaves can grow, so I can have a continual harvest throughout the summer and going into the fall. And something I learned too is you always want to stay on top of harvesting your basil, because if you don't, it will go to seed on you and then the basil will not taste good. So my tip would be to always harvest continually and then preserve it if you don't need it for fresh eating. And whenever I'm harvesting, especially a lot of food or herbs at one time, I will always have a very large bucket or basket near me so that I can throw everything in one spot. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Okay, right here. You see this? It's flowering. That's what you do not want with your basil, and this is why you want to continue to harvest it all the time so that it doesn't flower on you, because what it wants to do is it wants to produce seed to survive. Now, there are some basils that are supposed to flower, like Tulsi holy basil or your lemon basil, but this is the Genovese or the sweet Italian or your large leaf. You don't want that to flower, so you want to continue to harvest all the time. Now, majority of all my basil is surrounding my tomato plants, and so far I've had really great success when it comes to the tomato hornworm. I had about 5 to 7 of them, but I caught them in time and I checked my garden every day. But I do think that the basil is helping tremendously because the smell of basil throws their smell off. Okay, I'm losing lighting here, but I'm going to harvest one of the lemon basils that is supposed to flower so I can show you a comparison. Right here is a lemon basil, and this right here is supposed to flower this way. It smells so good. I wish you could smell this, but these are supposed to flower along with the Tulsi holy basil that I grew here as well. Sorry, my camera was not as focused as I wanted it to be, but as you saw, the top had some flowering. Some basil is supposed to do that, like I'd mentioned, the lemon basil and the Tulsi holy. Look at how big that one is, this basil. I forgot the name of it, but it's beautiful, and they're huge, beautiful leaves. Something you can do to have fun with your large basil leaves, you can use them as a wrap instead of a tortilla or in place of lettuce on a hamburger. Remember, whenever you're growing your own herbs, always try to think of some fun, creative ways that you can use them and just experiment. Okay, so now I'm gonna harvest all of my Tulsi holy basil. This is one of my favorite basils because not only does it smell amazing, but we also make a tea out of it. We'll boil about 2 gallons of water with the leaves. I'll strain the leaves out, add some honey and some lemon, or you can add lime or whatever you want, and we make our homemade tea out of that. No preservatives, no additives, just wholesome homemade goodness. Now, as you see, these basil plants are very bushy, but once I harvest today, within a week or 2, they will grow massively bushy again. This is why I love growing basil so much. And this is a Tulsi holy basil. You can see the flowering right here, and this is what we make our tea out of. We also make it out of the lemon basil as well. They're both very delicious. So here is the final harvest of all my basil. You can see that I harvested a ton of it. As far as preserving, I prefer the method of freeze drying, and at the very end, I will show you the final product of all my basil. But there are other ways to preserve basil as well. You can freeze it or you can dry it. And now what I plan to do is clean everything with a good vinegar soak to get any bugs off, and then rinse it off to get it prepared for the freeze dryer. So here is the final product of most of the freeze-dried basil. I have one more tray to freeze dry, but I place them in 1-gallon Ziploc bags that I like to reuse, and I'll write a tab and just tape it on there. But this is the basil that I was able to harvest and freeze dry, and now I will have a lot for my family in the kitchen to use. And here's a close-up of the dwarf basil that's freeze dried. You can see that it just crumbles in my hand, and I like to spread this on pizzas or put it in some Italian dishes. I will also leave a link in the description below that shares a complete guide to growing basil plants for extra information. So thanks for stopping by and watching me harvest all of my basil. Basil is just one of those herbs I'm always going to grow in my garden because not only does it pair so well with tomato plants because of pest pressure, but the more and more you harvest basil, the more and more it continues to grow. And I have not had to purchase basil at the store for quite a long time, which does save us money. And it's a very easy herb to preserve and a very versatile herb to use in the kitchen. So I hope that this encouraged you to grow basil in your garden as well. I appreciate you all stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.